Morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that your meeting of the traditional lands of the First Nations and has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. In particular, I acknowledge the history, spirituality, and culture of the territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, people of the three fibers known as the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen, Chippewas of Nawash, known collectively as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection to this area, as well as the contributions of the Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous people whose ancestors share these lands and waters. May we live with respect for each other on this land and live in peace and friendship with all of its diverse peoples. Miigwech. Prior to today's meeting, the board met in closed session to review and discuss matters that in their opinion fell under Section 44 of the Community Safety and Policing Act and Section 25, Item B of the Onsound Police Services Board's General Policy 003, Board Governance. This time I'd like to get a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Bev, thank you. Carol, thank you. All in favor? Carrie? Okay. Declaration of conflict of interest arising out of the minutes and matters listed on the agenda. Hearing none. Under number 5, we have oh, I thought you were sorry. Okay. Presentations. We have a deputation from Jack Brockman. He's from Uber. He's run into a conflict with the meeting, so he won't be able to be here until approximately 11:15, and he'll be signing in over Zoom. And that being said, I think, Chief, you have a couple of presentations to make.
Yeah, so want to formally recognize we had our two retirements earlier this year, Sergeant Hahn and Sergeant Baker, both retired. Yeah, promotional process within the police service, and I'm proud and happy and pleased to introduce our two newest sergeants in the Onsound Police Service, Nick Houston and Glenn Trombley. And they're here for a quick presentation, and so that you will all get to meet them and know what they are. Congratulations to both of them. Thank you. First one. Congratulations, Glenn. What's that? Oh, yeah, camera over here. That's what contact. Thank you. Beautiful. We'll get one with both of us and do it, maybe you can step in. You can do one as well. You got it yourself. Beautiful. I get one on the chair. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Congratulations. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good stuff.
I have funny things.
Thank you. Yeah, that's not a problem. We gotta get that way.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. That's wonderful. Sure is.
Great. Being on confirmation of the minutes from the public session of June 20th. Have a motion to accept those minutes. Carol, thank you. Brian, thank you.
Sure.
All in favor?
We're good.
Is any business arising out of the public session meetings on May 29th? Hearing none. Correspondence received. In your package, you would have found the Inspector General Memo number 5 and the Spotlight report that accompanied it. In the IG's email, it noted 12 recommendations that focused on shared responsibility of police services, police service boards, and the Ministry of the Solicitor General to further strengthen Ontario's public order system. The attached spotlight report on policing protests and major events, public order maintenance in Ontario boards highlighted that boards and police chiefs should review and update their public order maintenance policies to create more effective governance. And I'll be forwarding this report on to Dave Preston, who looks after writing our policies to ensure that we're on compliance. I know that we reviewed them in February of this year, so I'm going to assume that they're pretty close. If they're not, then maybe some major tweaking based on the latest report that came out from the IG. One of the recommendations contained in the report noted that there was police service that not maintaining its own public order unit. Boards must ensure that there's a valid agreement in place and in compliance with section 14 of the CSPA, and to have another board or the OPP commissioner provide POU services. I think the chief would agree that there's been a fair bit of discussion surrounding section 14 agreements and being worked on. Chief, do you have anything to add to that?
No, we haven't heard anything from you in relation to the agreements, and I know they're being worked on, and you know, Hank, you may have an update on that from the ministry side of things, but I think we're just waiting. The current agreements from the PSA are being effective, I understand, until the new ones are looked after, so we would have under the old act that will maintain until the new agreements come out.
That is correct, and as far as the status for section 14, I've been told the last meeting it's on the corner of their desk ready for approval. Having said that, I've also been in receipt now of other section 14s of other services, so there's nothing stopping you guys from entering into like Waterloo, for example, if you chose to do so. I know we're waiting for a template, but some services have chosen to wait no longer.
And I think the spotlight report, I think might fall under training. While it's not mandatory, it does highlight the mandatory compliance issues that the police board must comply with. So there is education, if nothing more than training. So
if any question anybody has, I'm happy to answer it for spotlight. I was involved very heavily with that.
Oh, okay, good.
I co-led the inspection of the province.
Okay.
I went to every police at a public order unit, interviewing their staff, reviewing their equipment, policies. So I was a big part of this originally, 23 and 24 prior to going to my role now. So if you have any questions after read the report, please, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Now, did you look at the policies of other municipal services?
We did all 43 municipal services. We
Okay.
reviewed all their policies, sure that they were compliant. And again, this was done under the police services. So it's not done under legislation. Had this been done, the same inspection done now, it would be under the Community Safety and Policing Act. Those recommendations the IG made probably be directions. Because under the Police Services Act, you didn't have the authority then.
At that time.
So they're being recommended. And they're very straightforward, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, you will be viewing. I guess if anything, I have to highlight the one sentence that he has as conclusion. Is that the state of public order policing in Ontario is strong. And I can concur with that, having been to every department that has a public order unit, it is much stronger now than it was 3 or 4 years ago. Ontario is in a pretty good position with respect to public order units.
And unfortunately, that's just the sign of the times. It's what's happened.
Well, I will make a comment on that, and that is the fact that if there were something significant that was happening across the province, the ability and the number of public order units could be surpassed under the current measures. So it's something that we're considering discussing amongst the local municipal services here about not necessarily having a full public order unit, but expanding some trainings for some members and having the ability to be trained. We don't have enough members to make public order unit. It would take up all our membership, but the ability to have some officers who are trained and that could join in or could assist or could be deployed locally for a smaller event with some specialized training is something that we need to consider. And that also comes with some equipment and costs.
Great, thanks, Hank. Should be. On that. Moving on, item B, there was a thank you letter from the OAPSB thanking us for sponsoring the AGM this spring. Next item, Wellness Recovery Center marks 1 year of transforming mental health addiction care. This report came from Bright Shores Wellness and Recovery Center, and it opened its doors 1 year ago with a vision to transform mental health and addiction care in our local community. I think reading through the report, it highlights some of the successes that the center has had, and it's a great example of the type of reporting that all social services should be providing to further highlight what they're doing in the community and being able to show some success stories. So hats off to Bright Shore. I think they did an excellent job, and this is only year 1, and probably coming in year 2 and 3, they'll have and get their processes down pat.
So as a board, when we receive information like that, that really informs us.
It does.
And also as a message of hope for the community.
Yeah.
Does the board ever communicate back, for example, to an organization, just thanks for your information, we found it helpful and we reviewed it at our board meeting or whatever? Like, do we ever do that?
Not formally, I don't think, not in the past, I don't remember.
And
You would do it at Star Table.
This came to me and I forwarded it on to the chair.
Yeah.
Just because I thought it was important the board know about
Yeah.
it, but I certainly reached out to Mike. Thanked him and appreciated it.
Perfect, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, it just reinforces, but it also supports what they're doing as far as statistical information that we.
Data driven.
Exactly.
Where are they in terms of funding? Are they, I know they didn't have enough funding to begin to do what she wanted, to do, but are they getting enough funding?
I don't know exactly the answer to that. I know that they are funded through the Ministry of Health to run it and keep it open. I don't know that they got everything they asked for.
Now, is that the one on 14th Street you're talking about?
Old school.
Oh, the Hillcrest, okay, that's our baby, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know they think there was some discussion around funding for the one on 14th Street.
That was just CMHA.
Yes.
Kind of
All right, moving on to any other comments on the reports or correspondence we received? Going on to Chairman's report, just a couple of items for the public session here. On June 3rd, I attended the OAPSB AGM and Spring Conference in London. And we had the annual general meeting at that point in time. And just to discuss some of the focus areas that the board will be looking at, there'll be more information coming out that in the future, sure. There was well over 450 in attendance, and there were some great presentations by police leaders and training opportunities and by breakout sessions were offered during this conference. And the planning is underway for the next year's event. It's going to happen in Niagara. Under the heading of meetings on June 12th, 25, Francesca Staubin invited the chief and me to her offices for a meeting as a result of my recent letter for a meeting with council. Overall, it was a very productive meeting, and as a follow-up to that meeting, she provided some charts and graphs showing the support being provided by the United Way to the community. And Chief, I think you've had some other meetings as well with some other social agencies.
Yeah, not
Do you have any comments on that, or?
yes, and that was pretty safety well-being thing, CMHA. Yeah, well, I met with a number of different agencies as well, about the discussions.
And all of those were positive, or any?
Yes, yeah, and basically the message was that, you know, it's to open a conversation, it's to look at the problem by a multi-sector approach. The message went to the city to initiate the discussions, but really it was to open the door. Broader conversation about where everybody's role is in that, and it was pointed out that nobody in social services role is substance abuse. So it's one that needs to be tackled from everybody's.
Really?
And
That's interesting.
what she said. No one specific.
Yeah, true, you're right, now I think back, yeah.
No, it's to open the door and have a conversation, see what we can do, what everybody can do together to make it better.
So if there is a gap in addictions, in the addictions component that's not, doesn't fit within the mandate of the social services as we know them now, what happens now that that gap's been identified? Where does the advocacy come from to say, where do we go from here? Because it impacts so many and it impacts our community. So there's been a gap. No social service has it within their mandate. Police services responds to the issues relating to what can happen. Where do we go?
Because that'll be the point of the meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that might be a product of the meeting that we have with
Okay.
council and other.
So,
Good.
so the advocacy role, a very critical discussion point then. Thank you.
Pardon me. Moving on to governance, I have nothing to report for this open session under governance. Hank, do you have anything from the ministry that you would like to?
Just focusing on strat plans. I see your operations plans in effect till 2026. You guys are in good shape. And I'm also focusing on annual reports, which I think is yet to come. So I'm good. Thank you, sir.
Okay, good.
Ta-da.
Yeah, it's coming. What
Ah,
a good segue.
Back on the 30th.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Moving on to May monthly reports.
Okay, I'm starting. Criminal investigations and drug unit. So, for an item that's always on here are homicides. They're actually coming up on 2 years now, so. One was in July of 2023, so. The great part is they are mostly wrapping up. There is only one lingering charge, sticking around for homicide number one, which was one of the co-accused, who had been charged with perjury, so that's still outstanding. The main accused in that one is coming back in July to enter a guilty plea. For the second homicide, the young offender has pled guilty, being accessory after the fact, received a sentence of time served, and the other accused, the adult in that case, will be has entered a guilty plea and he returns for sentencing in August, so that will wrap that as well. Homicide number 3, which is the Curry House Ramen homicide. That one continues to work its way through the UK court system with respect to extradition for the 3 persons that are charged in that case, adjourned until August 14th, 2025. Miranda Miller from the Owen Current's been doing a great job of reporting on those hearings as they've been coming up with some of the details of what's been going on, but that process in the UK is really outside of the hands of the Owen Sound Police. We won't become involved until there is a decision made on that extradition. So there was a sexual assault investigation. You may have seen a media release that came from the school board with respect to a teacher that had been charged with from secondary school, charged with sexual assault, sexual exploitation in regards to a student. That person has made his first appearance in court and has been arrested, and the investigations branch is continuing to do follow-ups respect to any potential additional victims that may be outstanding. We had a fatal fail to remain collision on May the 10th. In the early morning hours of that day. 21-year-old male has been charged with dangerous operation of a motor vehicle causing death, failure to stop at the scene of an accident causing death. There is quite a bit of work still happening with the criminal investigations branch in relation to that case, with a number of search warrants and technical investigations that are going on as well. So there are the right remainders, some stats on training, amateur meetings, stuff that we regularly report on. We have been doing well with our drug overdoses. However, in May, there were an additional 2 suspected drug-related deaths, which is at 3 a year. I still think we're trending lower than we have in past years, but that's a concerning trend for the two that have been picked up in May, so. You may have also seen a number of media releases that went out back and forth with respect to a young missing 15-year-old female missing from a residence on the city's east side. That created quite a bit of work for our criminal investigations branch. Did a great job with locating that youth. She was apprehended, returned on May 28th. That case actually continues on for some of our neighboring services as well, because that's cases continue to be an issue. Auxiliary board report, here's some questions. 174 volunteer hours from our auxiliary unit in May. They participated in the annual Wheel and Ride Safety Festival. I believe you had a letter from the city on that, our last board meeting. Respect the success of that event. And also on May 12th, unit took part in the annual Shop at the Top event. Great success, raising funds for the Salvation Army. So 5 new auxiliary members have been selected. They are going to be signing offers very shortly, and we are just looking at how we can get them trained in a relatively short period of time, because as you've heard from Chief, our training officer runs the road for the summer most months, so we're looking at the alternate process to be able to get them in and get them trained up so we can get them added to our auxiliary complement. Questions, the core unit? The core unit ended up, which is Constable Meany, ended up being tied up in a number of different things throughout the month. So there are some stats there for him because we have a couple of vacancies in the criminal investigations branch. He's been assisting with that. He was also, because we ran our block training, our spring block training in May. 2 weeks of that was that officer doing coverage so that the other officers can attend. He also had 40 hours of vacation in May, so that one was a little light this month, but that's the reason. Bill Compliance and Environmental Prevention Unit. That is the same thing. The officer that we have assigned to that spent quite a bit of time working on that fatal hit and run investigation that we had. He was able to do a lot of the warrants and got some great experience working along with our CIB officers for that. So again, there's some reduced hours from what you would normally see from Constable Curry there. But he did get some work in, which has been a little credit. And go to frontline patrol report collision statistics. This just shows you our collision stats related to May of 2025. Actually down a little bit, which is good news. These are historically weather related. You'll see as it trends through the year, as the weather starts to warm up. We do get numbers start to drop, but yeah, I'm not sure why we May 2024 unless we had some bad weather in May, but anyway.
Snow.
Yeah, could be. And above that, you just have your HTA. Again, it's down slightly, but as the chief explained, we're carrying a number of vacancies. It probably explains for some of that as well. 17 on-duty ride checks in the month of May, 529 drivers checked. The stats are there. 4 people were charged in the city during the month outside of road ride programs. We had 1 driver charged as a result of the ride program. And as a result as well. So then, sorry to see your collision stats there as well. And that's that report, unless there's any questions.
Great, I'll cover off the community services. Our community service officer, Jason Crenny, is always busy. Involvement, a number of things. And so we had the Wheel and Ride, National Volunteer Week. There were some big events. Police Week, they were busy sending out a lot of messaging. You can see it does our media as well. number of community engagements with the local schools and lockdown procedures, student safety. They spent a fair amount of time. There were a lot of traffic issues in the school zone around St. Mary's School, and some of our officers assisted with that as well. And, the VTRA planning meetings, they're looking at hosting another session in the fall for ourselves, school board, and our community, other community partners. A number of presentations to different schools, and including a couple Sarawak. They made a request of us, and their thoughts were that although they sit outside our jurisdiction, the majority of their kids are coming from Owen Sound, so we did make arrangements for him to go and present there, and we received some very good feedback on that. Thank you for that. And that's it. Subject to any questions. Cool. For the last hours of training, if you want, Dave, it's up to you. There.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
So total the number of full-time members off down quite a bit from the previous month here, but sorry, up somewhat from their total number of shifts was up as well. The number of WSIB remains pretty consistent. Members attended the following courses. Block training was significant. Everybody in the service has to get through, including Dave and I, out to the range. We had some nice weather. Some of the members didn't have the nicest weather to be outside shooting in the outdoors in the rain. And a member attended the homicide course, human trafficking conference, and 3 members attended locally where we hosted, and it was in Saugeen Shores for confidential informer foundations run through CISO. So we tried to take advantage of the fact that it was local and send it to more people, despite our staffing issues. So, if you take questions, thank you for that. Records. Yeah.
This is Director Flynny's report, which you see every month. The first stats related to our bulk records searches. The numbers are down. The reason for that is staffing. We have cell monitors. We are getting trained up, see that start to increase, but it's related to the staffing issue. Back to the graph. Persons charged per month, relatively consistent, slightly lower than 2024, but they do tend to fluctuate from month to month. Respect to the courts, the number of transports, again, slightly lower, probably connected to the number of charges, but not out of range. Special constable hours, the number for April was up. If you recall, I explained that was because of the number of the trials that we had, and also because we had 5 new specials in training. So it increases the number of hours as they're mentoring with other special constables. So you're now starting to see that number come back down to normal again. Actually have 2 of those who are injured, so it has slowed their training down, but I believe the others are concluding their training now. That's for Director.
Okay, so I'll present on the Interesting Communications Center. We participated in the When Every Second Counts 911 misuse of 911 campaign across Ontario. We participated in an emergency event scenario alongside our fire partners, South Bruce Fire and Inter-Township Fire, as well as the OPP and our EMS partners. Simulated a plane making a hard landing on the runway at Wyerton International Airport. Our 911 calls just up slightly. your average daily rate up slightly, everything seems to be trending somewhat. The 70% of the calls are transferred still, which is good. 30% will be retained. Obviously, Grey County Transportation, the number of calls have now gone down because it's mostly in the winter time. We're receiving calls for them. Right at the same time as 2024, there's a year-to-date increase in 911 call volumes in all streams. Between 5 and 10%, mostly 7-8%. You'll see the call volumes there, pretty consistent, somewhat. Our CAD events, all police events are up slightly. All fire events are up 2%. Our police service in CAD for ourselves, they're more or less around the same, and excuse me, total dispatch to total of 5,981 calls or events for an average daily dispatch rate of 193 calls per day. That remains fairly consistent with April. The drop was Grey County Transportation. Year to date, compared to the same time in 2024, we're recording a 14% increase in the average daily dispatch rate. Year to date coverage now at 189 events compared to 165 per day. The greatest increase of that is police. So continue to monitor staffing and workload. Information technology, it was busy with NG911 implementation, where progress is slow, but we'll continue to work with our vendors in Bell Canada to go through the implementation testing. There are approximately 600 tests for both the main site and the alternate site. And as we work through those to get fully certified for NG911, we onboarded a new uninterrupted power supply system with the backup dispatch center in order to provide better continuous operation before the building-wide generator starts. We're working with a Hyper AI vendor for dispatch integrations for administrative calls, AI for administrative call processing, to try and eliminate some of the calls into our dispatchers. And did some work at the courthouse, working on better coverage throughout the building for the radios, and spent a number of days tied up resolving some station issues for CAD. There were some times when it crashed in one of the desks, so that was a significant issue. We were down to 3 desks working on one day, so our IT members spent a lot of time working on resolving that issue. And we had a visit from the inspector to policing as part of their ongoing consultations regarding emergency response times, and so we've spent about 3.5 hours talking to them about what we do, how we do it. They were very interested and pleased with their visit. So that's about it.
Yeah, I think that their visit was based on you volunteering to help them out with some of this analysis.
Yeah, correct. They reached out and we brought them in. We got them in as part of the request to explain exactly how to serve a number of different agencies, because everywhere else that they're going, they're serving one agency. So made it a lot better, and we talked about how to standardize response times, how to standardize call types, and how we can't look at one without looking at the other.
I may put your name for all the time for that.
That's perfect. I'm fine with that.
The other quick question is, so around 5,900 to 6,000 calls a month. When do we max out under our current configuration? Not for a while?
I can't give you an answer, sir, on that exactly. Obviously, as we start to look at time, if the times and the delays start to come in, then we'll look at staffing changes.
Okay. All right, good.
Yeah, we're still meeting on 90% of the calls within the required times.
Described time. All right. Reach is here. So 10-minute recess. Yeah, I do. Item number 14, and report from manager of HR.
Yeah, so and some interviews for his position, and we're just putting it on the candidate, successful candidate. We're moving forward with that. The auxiliary interviews, as Inspector Bishop mentioned earlier, took place. And overwhelmed by the number of volume of applications, and have the opportunity to add several more, I think 5.
Yeah.
So we're going forward with that. We hired 3 civilian, part-time civilian cell block managers, and we hired 2 recruit constables, Reed Canal and Arjit Singh. And they've commenced their OPC training online and will join this college in July. Transfers, Curtis Glode was successfully posted in the position of training officer, and will be moving likely in the fall, late summer. As well as the promotions, it's not on here, but because it wasn't effective in May, but Sergeant Houston and Sergeant Tremblay. We had a part-time cell block monitor and special constable resign, a part-time dispatcher resign. Another part-time cell block monitor resigned, and we lost a full-time police constable, Constable Reed, who went to the York Regional Police Service. And we will confirm all of their resignations. The Wellness Committee had a step challenge throughout the month, and every day that people walked over 10,000 steps, they were entered into draws for gift certificates, and promoted a number of individuals moving forward. So they had some really good prizes, and we had really good participation, and our total number of steps, I believe, took us from Newfoundland to Regina. We were trying to get across Canada, but we had some members that were way up there, hiking the Bruce Trail from Wyerton to Tobermory during the span of that time. Yeah, there were some really good results. And then there were some of us that spent more time at our desk than walking, and so not so good results, but everybody had a good time, and
Some very competitive members here, including their
Mark.
executive assistant, Mark.
yeah.
Both were convinced that another member might have touched a stepper onto the collar of their dog or something.
Cute.
We had members participate in the survey to assess our occupational stress in the workplace, offered through the Public Services Health and Safety Association, and promoted that. Moving that forward, the survey results fall into one of 3 risk categories based on the scores: challenge, concerning, and thriving. A higher score reflects stronger psychological health and safety conditions and lower vulnerability. Total scores based on 4 subscales. Those results will be coming in June. I just received them the other day, but I'm not going to comment on we received them. We've received them, but I'll wait to update you next month with a little bit more detail. And that's about it. Moving on to my activity report, I was off for a day. Spent a significant amount of time doing HR interviews and dispatch work. We had a very brief police leaders meeting on training. So how do we move forward with the mandatory training on mental health throughout Grain Bruce, and try and coordinate it so that we can run it the most efficiently using all 4 of those services. And so we spent some time doing that and a number of other joint discussions. Spent a day at the OSPSB zone meeting, met with the community business owner downtown, a couple of meetings, community drug and alcohol strategy. We had hosted a recruiting info night and at Owen Soundproof service that was well attended, and it was the first one we've hosted, so that was good. Had a meeting with Dr. Era from Greater Bruce Public Health. They taped a Rogers TV over copy session with Mary Jane, and as I mentioned previously, the Inspector of Policing Data Research team was here. That's it.
That was item 16. We missed it.
Item number 15. I don't have a detailed report yet because we're still waiting. Apparently, this next pay period will be the new pay rates, and it will include the retroactive pay, which will then give us a better idea where we sit as far as budget. Now that being said, there remains other negotiations on go with the other associate, with the Senior Officers Association. So there, it won't give us an idea, a final number, but at least it'll give us some idea where we sit better.
All right, now moving on to item number 17. And a new business. Regarding a political affiliation policy, in your package, you would have received a new draft policy for general policy 024 regarding political activity. And it's Dave Preston has drafted this for your review. And I ask now, are there any questions on this draft policy that was created by Dave? If there are no questions, could I have a motion to approve the new board policy? Right, thank you. Second that, thank you. All in favor? I get that back to Dave and get him to put in the proper number and make sure he's got it loose up. The next item is on funding. And Carol had suggested we bring this topic up for general discussion. I think we added to last month's agenda because we ran out of time. But under the was funding that she was talking about was availability of funding for provincial or federal to support the increased administration costs to police services as a result of the CSPA. And second item was how can municipalities and police services support adequate and effective policing and the capital costs to maintain service standards required. Those are pretty big questions and probably have a pretty big answer. But if I go back to the first one, it talks about availability of funding. I don't think there's funding from the federal government under the CSPA or for CSPA. I wouldn't. So, do you know if anything thought about for funding the CSPA provincially from the ministry?
I'm not, nothing conclusive.
Yeah.
As far as being talked about, of course, yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard it discussed at other boards as well. I know there's some concern with that, but as far as anything conclusive from the ministry, there's none of them.
I know there's been considerable discussion at the Zone 5 meeting and also at the B conference. Maybe not so much in public forums, but I know a lot of little networking conversation. We're talking about the costs that the new act is having. Carol, is your name?
Is there any way, as the conversations are occurring, that that there could be even some perception or understanding of what do the figures start to look like? What are we're talking about the need for it, but how do we track? Because as conversations happen around budget time, as conversations happen about, the cost of the providing service, there needs to be that relationship around the changes that have happened versus changes in volume need for service versus all of the administrative costs because of the legislative change. So in the conversations, is there a way to start saying to date, this is the dollar figure that we have had to absorb to be able to make the changes. So we start to quantify what the new legislation is doing, because those dollars are have to be found somewhere. And I'm just wondering, as everyone is making the changes, that there's a way or a template or a way to track the common elements and attach some sort of quantitative figure to that to kind of the place.
You may have to change the expectations. I think that's what it is. They just expect you to absorb the extra administrative costs that come with it.
Yeah, I guess that's the case, but eventually, and it's very difficult to. It's very difficult to quantify, you know what, I can carry my backpack full of stuff. And every time, if you add this, it doesn't add too much. And this, it doesn't add too much, and nobody really keeps track of all the downloads from. And it's not just the CSPA, it's downloads from the court system, it's downloads from all these different areas. And eventually, the backpack, it's like the lobster in the water, the backpack gets too heavy and it's crippling. And eventually you get to the point where you can't carry the backpack anymore, but you can't attribute that to one little item that's been put into the backpack. And I think that's what we're getting to now as far as the CSBA. The implementation was one thing, there was a big steep learning curve. But even just keeping up with the other things as you learn more about it, and Dave can attest to the fact that you know, something comes up and you read and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize we weren't doing that, and we have to do this. And you know, the annual report, we're always working on it this time of year, but the scramble was, it has to be done by June 30th to be posted on the website. And thank you, Hank. And you know, because sometimes it isn't done by June 3rd. In the past, before it was legislated, in the past, you know, well, we didn't quite get it done, so it might not be June 3rd, by the June 30th deadline. Because there wasn't a deadline, that just now there is. So it's all those things that start to add up that make it really difficult. As far as costs, I'll tell you. The mental health training for the officers, on the high end, it'll be $100,000. That is unbudgeted, unaccounted for. On the low end, 30 to 40, depending, because we need to hire actors, as opposed to getting virtual reality glasses. The virtual reality equipment and the subscription was $88,000 for the service. We had to do that. So we're trying to, that was the meeting, the training meeting, joint training meeting I had with the other chiefs, because we're trying to keep those costs to a minimum and hire the actors to come up and do all 4 services at the same time. But that still takes, how many days, Dave, to get everybody through service training? It's 8. So it'll still be at least 4 or 6 days to get everybody through for all the services and hiring all those resources. The actual cost of the course is a lot less, but then it's everything that goes with it. So, I mean, that's one that you can quantify. But there are so many that I can't quantify, and so it's really difficult to answer what exactly the cost of that is. Because you know, you'll see, we'll do some SIU reporting. SIU makes a decision, and now there's reporting requirements that go to the service. Now it's kind of, this is a new unknown. If they create a, you know, if they create a number in their books to do some inquiries, does that now trigger the needs of the new act that we now have to do a follow-up, whereas before it didn't trigger that. And now the new legislation says it may. It does.
So much.
So, but we don't have to necessarily post it, but it's even interpreting all those things. It takes time.
So thank you for that. My request then through the board chair, and I'm not sure if the provincial rep can assist with this, but when budgets are decided on data, and you know, there's the narrative, the anecdotal, and the impression. Is there a way in the next time the legislation is discussed in the larger group, or is there an approach that can be asked if anyone has, you know, sort of started to track those, I'm going to call them administrative indirect costs and the direct costs like the equipment for training, so that when the request goes forward and the acknowledgement that this is costing money, there can start to be some requests for offset funding. Otherwise, it's still a narrative, but it's not necessarily information-based. Even a range, you know, it doesn't have to be, but a range of the increased that has to be absorbed from everyone's budget.
Just a list of what the downloads are.
Yeah, that'd be good
You
too.
know, without putting a price on. If there's some you can't put a price on, at least have a list. And just kind of put them in. Educated.
Now, is this list, who's the audience for this list?
Well, I think it has to go back. And that's where you're. If I'm understanding Carol's point, that's where. The ask is, you're trying to get funding for the additional administrative costs that they're downloading onto us. Then if there's a list of 20, they add up.
I agree with that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but so they've listed things in the act that thou must do. So they already know the list. Do they not?
Well, perhaps,
The
but
thing that the issue is that they don't know how much it's gonna cost individual municipal services. And that's gonna be our challenge, is we understand the list and the government understands the list.
Yeah.
They don't understand the cost to each municipality.
maybe they don't have a list. Maybe they just.
It's in the act.
Yeah.
Right, Hank?
I don't know if there's a list per se, that's.
No, no, it's not a list,
it
but-
has, But yeah, they've written the act on it, obviously, so they know what the act contains, but no list per se saying there's an increase here,
Yeah.
But it's a list that would be a wake up call even for them, do you not think? I mean, it's easy just to send this and then 3 days later send that and not realizing, like, you
Well-
realize what you're doing here, you've got a list of.
Well, I think they know what they require because they'll have a checklist on the other side and say, yep, they submitted that, yep, they submitted that. So they've got a quasi list, if you want to call it that.
So what you're
That's based
suggesting,
in the sections of the act. What we need to do is identify those things that we're checking off and just dollars, $6.
Give it as a template, onto it back to the what potential implications. And obviously it's not, it could be objects, individuals or whatever, but I don't think it should be just our chief of police who does this. I believe it needs to be a shared initiative so that there may be others who have that more readily handy. I think it needs to be from all. And that goes back to our advocacy. Of course, it can be tracked locally. The chief has already mentioned some things, but even starting to have a common template of those increased costs as a result of the legislative changes, and then open it up for discussion amongst all who are obligated to follow that and see if there can be some attachment to costs so that depending on the audience, it's supporting documentation for any potential requests that may need to happen. Whether it's bottom line budget, whether it's HR resource, whether it's capital investment. But otherwise, again, it just starts to put a range of dollar figures to what we are obligated to do. That would be my request around this.
What we could do, or I can contact OSPSB and see if they can put a list together. Because they're the ones that are familiar with the act and different
Yeah.
things, and whether they can create a template
Yes.
that these are the new reporting requirements.
Yeah.
Under the act.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I can see an issue with SIU reporting. That may be very heavy this month and nothing the next month. And then super heavy 3 months down the road.
Yeah.
So then we get into an issue of tracking those columns. And do we also in that template put additional staff resources to track costs?
And we have to not use our existing tight resources. So I'm thinking spreading it across a larger group who provide input offloads the one-on-one need. Because if others don't feel it's value added, then obviously we just don't pursue. But I think at least making the request saying we need to start to make this so that it is data informed. Otherwise, it's still a narrative which may be very challenging when you're presenting it to different audiences. Or they're just saying as opposed to proving. But I think it might be worth at least making the ask.
For you, Chair, if I could, I think part of the challenge you might be faced with that is the cost with different services. Cost
For sure.
on something totally different. You might think it might cost a bigger service more money because it's a larger scale.
Sure,
Then they have resources on staff to do it, so perhaps that cost isn't quite the same. So that's
True,
where the
true.
challenges might lie provincially.
true.
Having said that, I was gonna say the exact same thing you said, sir, with respect to OSPSB. That I think, and I think some boards are making an effort to try already.
Good.
To what extent, I don't know, and how global, I don't know. But I think that's probably the venue to pursue as far as having that global perspective of the added costs.
And I'm sure they've had discussions with other services on. And I think it's gonna impact, maybe I'm wrong, but my assumption would be, it's gonna impact the small and mid-sized Big 12, and like somebody like Peel that just got a 23% increase in budget is probably not going to notice.
They have people for that.
Yeah.
They have capacity to do that. They have more people.
Yes.
Injured
Of
to
course, they
fill the gaps than we have working here.
Yes,
And so it's
Lawyers on site.
lawyers on site, lawyers on staff,
Yeah.
all those resources.
It's not a fair
And-
comparison.
no,
And you have to remember, yes, there may be a narrative to it, but this is an adequacy issue and it has to be properly funded, be adequate and effective.
Mhm.
And so if the capacity isn't there,
exactly.
regardless of how you defend the increase, the capacity isn't going to do the work, and it's an adequacy issue, and you need to remain adequate and effective, then it really isn't a lot of option, it's a rate, it's a law.
It's legislative, we have no option.
There's a whole regulation on adequate effectively.
That was just a thought, a
No, no, I
request,
agree.
Mhm.
and who knows what might come
But
up,
I'll still go to OAPSB
for sure.
and have that discussion with them and see what they say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because we have them coming up in, may not be July, because I don't want to distract from the strategic planning, but look in the future. Go ahead.
So the CSPA has been in development for a very, very long time. There were an awful lot of meetings that happened over the
Yeah.
last 10 years with respect to that. A lot of the legislation that you do now see in the CSPA was hashed out many, many times over the years. And I sat on a bunch of those meetings
Yeah.
where all of this was applied, where commonly we'd be saying, do you understand how much work this will create for the police service? So that input had been given by police services, and I was quite surprised when the act came out and had most of those items still in as originally stated, where I don't think the consideration was given for our concerns with respect to the workload that it creates. Conservatively, I'd say the new act, not the implementation piece, but just the ongoing stuff is probably at 30% my job. But not only that, there's every piece of oversight that we have, whether it's SAU, like the IOP, all of those things where we have obligations to the province have all ramped up in the last year or two with respect to how they're handling all of the different things. Even with the law enforcement complaints agency, we're seeing a lot more stuff come through that we probably wouldn't have seen before. That isn't really a complaint, but we get assigned to have investigated. So there's an administrative side to doing it. It's got to get attached to a sergeant downstairs or myself to do a very large report that comes out of them for things that historically we probably wouldn't have seen a complaint on, that would have been screened out. It's just all of these little things, just as the chief said, keep adding to the pile.
Then
I
absent.
would challenge anybody from the ministry to tell me one piece of case law or piece of legislation that's come out recently in the last number of years that has taken anything off the plate of police services and hasn't added to it. And you know, we seem to get it from every direction. You know, the chief's talked about, you know, a judge in Walkerton who just decides that large case is going to get transferred to Owen Sound. There's never dollars associated in their minds. It's always a stroke of a pen that just says, there you go. And that's, I think what we're talking about here is no one ever actually looks to see what those impacts are locally. And they all cost money. And I don't know where you go with that. But it shouldn't come as a surprise for any of these things that we would put down to say, this is now costing us
This is
8 hours a week.
additional.
Even things like the special constable training and that, when they come out and mandate what that looks like, there's costs. What did we go to 5 weeks of special constable training? We used to have nowhere close to that. So now we have a training officer who's committed for all of 5 weeks and can't do all of his block training. And because there's new regulations for all the other officers too, which, so do you need a second training officer? I don't know who's paying for that. It's all these little things that just keep whacking away at us that it's become very hard to manage.
Just wanna-
Another day of training for mental health training.
Can you
You have to cover everybody in the room.
There's a dollar
Sound for
figure
Jake?
to that.
I just want to acknowledge that Jake's here.
Hi, Jake.
Hi, Jake.
Oh, hi there. How's everyone doing?
Good. If you just give us another 10 minutes, we'll try and wrap this conversation up if that
All
works.
good. No rush. No rush. Whenever you're wrapped up, I'll speak then.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks, Jake.
Bye for now.
Okay, sorry. I just want to make sure that he's been there sitting there for a few minutes. I just wanted to make sure.
Great.
The other thing too, and correct me if I'm wrong. So with the new act came the IOP. And I know some of the people in there had their business cards changed, or were working with the ministry before. The name was changed on the business card. How many new staff did they add to the IOP to review the reports that all the other services were now required to give them? And not only IOP, I'm thinking of the SIU, I'm thinking of the LECA. How many additional staff were hired there? Support.
Can't speak at all on LACA or on
Yeah.
SIU, but I can on IOP, of course, so. Prior to the act to be into place and the IOP being in existence, there was police service advisors, they've always been in that function. And that's been through the PSB acronym, the ministry that uses
Yeah.
work. It's public safety revisions for the same. They were reported over to the IOP, so that's my role now.
Yeah.
So there's, I believe, 6 of those in the province. They had a manager before. I can tell you the IOP now roughly has about 70 members. As far as reviewing reports, I'm not sure exactly where that falls. I don't think the IOP does any of that review. Part of what we generate ourselves, for example, the SWAT report. Complaints and investigations. Within the IOP, we have the 2 sides of the house. We have CDII, Center for Data Intelligence Innovation, and that's who you dealt with, Chief, with the.
That's from Rita, I think, or Rex.
Right, exactly. Yep, she oversees that side of the house.
Yeah.
And I'd be lying if I said I knew exactly what they did, because I don't. Their data analytics, their management, their measures, they're all kinds of stuff that a lot of our doctors, I don't know what they really do, to be quite honest with you. Side of the house I'm familiar with is the IILB, which is the Investigations, Inspections, and Liaison.
Right.
So those 6 reported over before from Public Safety Division for liaison. It's the role I'm playing now. We have an investigation team of, let's say, approximately 10 people, just roughly. Same for investigations. And they investigate adequate and effective policing complaints. And I agree with you 100%. There's some complaints that come through from the IOP, probably to the service as well, that on the face of it, they appear very minor. They meet the mandate and therefore it's for investigation, again, at an added cost. And there's 10 members in that unit, roughly thereabouts. So in totality, I think it's like 35 on one side, 35 on the other side, and we have your administrative team as well.
So
That
maybe
answers that question.
close to 100 additional staff.
70 some. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But that gives you an idea on our end, what feeds that animal,
Mhm.
really. Is the information coming from us, and if it takes 70 to analyze all that information, it takes more than the existing staff
Defeated.
to feed it.
And that's why I said, I really don't know what role they play. I wish I knew more.
No, and that's fair.
No.
But I just wanted to put it in perspective that we had no real increase in staff. We just tried to absorb the extra workload. Yet what we're feeding has increased dramatically as far as the staffing. And they didn't have any problems with funding. We've got an issue with, if we want to continue to be in compliance with these guys that basically hold the reins, we need to do something here.
Not sure where else, though. You say that, I respect what you say. I'm not sure where else the ministry may have reallocated duties.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So there may have been not necessarily a 70 net new.
No,
other
yeah.
duties that have been foregone.
Sure.
But there's just an increase on one side and no increase on the other side. That's the issue that I'm trying to get across. So back to that list of things that we have to provide and the cost associated with it, we have to understand that that list was in the act and we haven't have any resources at all to complete those reporting items to give to someone else who has had a large increase in the number of staff.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to finish on that, you mentioned capital costs to meet adequate and effective. And yes, there were significant capital costs to meet adequate and effective. Just the equipment to go into each cruiser was a significant investment. But I'll point out, the city capital to the police is the same as it was 7 years ago. The buying power now, I would suggest, is 50% of what it was 7 years ago. And the rest of that is self-generated and self-funded. So we don't ask the city for 125,000 staff, I believe.
I think 150,000 is total capital.
Yeah. And so that's very, like, that's a pittance compared to what we actually spend.
So tracking all of that at least is critical. Thank you for taking that forward. At least we asked the question.
And I will take it through with OAP and
Yeah, yes.
see what they've got. And also I'll run that through the advocacy committee as well to see what they're doing to help with that.
No, there are some reports done from other chiefs that I think they come up with.
Yeah, I remember that. All right. That being said, we'll move back to our presentations. And if Jake, if you're ready to go, we'll get you set back up on the screen here.
Do you see
Welcome.
me, hear me? We're good to
Yes.
go.
Welcome. Thank you for.
Hey, thanks very much. Sorry about the delay. I had another meeting that conflicted, but appreciate you all having me. Let me just speak for just a few minutes about Uber and rideshare and where we find ourselves in Ontario with respect to expansion, and happy to take questions from folks. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I just had some meetings here in Toronto that I had to attend to today. I've been with Uber about 5.5 years, based in our Toronto office. And since I joined, our partner Mothers Against Drunk Driving has really been encouraging us as Uber to expand into more places across Canada because the data is very clear that when rideshare is present and readily available in a community, folks have more choices in how they get around, and they're not making the wrong choice more often than they should of drinking and driving. So since 2020, when I joined the company, we've been expanding into places like Halifax, Winnipeg, St. John's, Newfoundland, and most recently, this past month, we expanded province-wide in British Columbia and Newfoundland and Labrador, which means that right now, no matter where you are in urban, suburban, or rural parts of those two provinces, you'll be able to get a ride. But Matt has continued to press us, as have a number of municipal leaders and organizations from across the province about our plans in Ontario. We know that based on our data, over 1 million trips were attempted to take place in areas like Owen Sound that we don't operate in. And this was done by over 500,000 individual riders, primarily in southwestern Ontario, eastern Ontario, from Belleville all the way up into the Ottawa Valley, in places like Grey County and into Huron and Bruce, and then from really the tip of Lake Simcoe north. We see demand for trips really strong in all of those areas. And that's because, there is more economic activity in these areas. Folks are moving to these places. Folks are trying to give up one or two of their cars and need ways to get around. And a lot of seniors are trying to age in place and still make it to appointments to the grocery store and whatnot. So we have a goal as a company to expand rideshare services in the province. But right now we face a challenge with respect to the licensing frameworks that exist across the province. And right now there is a patchwork system that exists in places. There are some municipal regulation, there's regional regulation, there's deregulation in a number of places, and in the vast majority of places in Ontario, there's no regulation. And that's why organizations such as MAD, the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, Hope Air, the Tourism Industry Association, and others have been advocating for a provincial harmonized framework for rideshare. That is exactly what exists in British Columbia, Quebec, Newfoundland and Labrador. And that's something that we support because it reduces red tape for rideshare companies. It allows them to operate across geographic boundaries, which is a problem right now. And most importantly, allows companies to scale their services into rural and northern communities more easily, so that folks have another way to get around safely. So that's just the brief overview. Happy to share more documents with the board, and happy to take your questions now.
Thanks, Jay. Questions, comments? What are some of the challenges that you're looking at when you're talking about a harmonized licensing for rideshare?
Yeah, so the best examples of this are the provinces in Canada, and 49 US states actually have rideshare regulated at the state level. So what those provincial frameworks do, and you can look at Newfoundland and Labrador's framework that was introduced in late 2023 as the most recent example, is it sets standards province-wide for what a rideshare company needs to be, what a vehicle standard needs to be for a driver, what the driver's background checks and safety certificates need to look like, different rules about customer protection and upfront pricing, and it kind of lays out the rules of the road across the province. Because right now, one of the challenges is, whereas Owen Sound may have a framework in place, Saugeen Shores or Kincardine or Goderich, or the vast majority of other municipalities in gray don't have any rideshare bylaw or framework on the table. So that means that if we had a license to operate in Owen Sound, that would regulate pickups within Owen Sound, but it says nothing about trips that would end up outside of that municipal boundary, right? So the vast majority of the province is a gray area when it comes to rideshare policy, because this is not like a specific number, but there might be about 40 rideshare bylaws existing in Ontario. 400 municipalities have no municipal bylaw. So it's one large gray area. And that's really the challenge that the provincial framework in those other provinces seeks to address.
So how does it differ in the GTA for Uber from, say, Etobicoke to Scarborough to Mississauga?
Yeah, it's a great question, sir. So every single municipality in the GTHA has a different set of rules around rideshare. And this actually creates some very big challenges for drivers, because on one side of the road, your vehicle has to be 7 years to drive for Uber. On the other, it has to be 10 years. And that doesn't make much sense. It's the same service, no matter where it's happening. So what happens, sir, on our back end is that we have to program where someone is licensed, and that dictates where you can pick up or not. So today I had a driver call me because he had picked up in Toronto, driven to Barrie, but he's not licensed to pick up in Barrie, so he had to deadhead back. And that's obviously a suboptimal experience for him. So it's really a patchwork across the province. I'll tell you, some rideshare bylaws sit with police services boards like yourselves. Others are actually with the region. So we're regulated by the region of Waterloo and the region of Niagara. So it's a mess. It's a huge patchwork across, and it's becoming very challenging to operationalize that, because if every municipality were to pass their own rideshare bylaw, we could have 444 separate licensing arrangements, 444 separate rules for adjudicating background checks, for example, and that's a big challenge.
Go ahead. Guess,
What ministry of the government are you appealing to for an overall, say, provincial template to operate under?
It's a great question. So this touches so many different ministries. I would say the main ministries that are most seized of this file are obviously Ministry of Transportation. You know, they've heard very clearly from municipalities and stakeholders that have been sharing letters of support and advocacy. But as well, the Ministry of Rural Affairs, Minister Thompson from Huron-Bruce is very active on this file and is a very big champion of it. Because I'll give you, you know, in Huron-Bruce, the amount of demand we have in and around the Bruce nuclear plant, for example, is quite high. As well, the Ministry of Red Tape Reduction. And then from a public safety perspective, obviously the Solicitor General's office around roads, like, you know, drunk driving and road safety is a big you know, area of importance for us as well.
Who issued you a license to operate within the GTA?
So that it's every municipality has a different licensing framework in the GTA at the single tier level. In Waterloo region, Waterloo, Kitchener, and Cambridge, we have a license at the regional level. So it varies across. Someone like a place like Burlington doesn't have a rideshare bylaw, for example. So every piece of the map is slightly different.
Bless you.
So you're not willing, you're willing to go through all those hoops of GTA because of demand, but not willing to do it in our area.
No, so we haven't expanded anywhere in Ontario since 2018. Because the problem is that if we were to take on individual bylaws like in Owen Sound, that would only give us permission to operate within your municipal boundaries. It would not say anything about any of the neighboring municipalities or anywhere else in the county. So that is unfeasible right now because, you know, it means that that deadheading issue becomes a huge challenge for us because the trips don't only start and end within Owen Sound's municipal boundary. You know, we would estimate that a high propensity of those trips would cross a municipal boundary. And without that harmonization in the neighboring municipalities, the service becomes untenable from a scaled perspective. And it's why the vast majority of provinces and states have gone to this more harmonized level.
Carol?
So currently here in Grey County, there is an arrangement for transportation between communities that already exists, and it basically moves through the county level. So recognizing that moving things through provincial levels and, you know, different levels of government may take a very long time. Is there an option to consider upper tier if within an upper tier like Grey County or Bruce County, all of the municipalities would agree on a common bylaw framework? Is there a possibility in the short term that something can move forward so our residents can start to get service?
Yeah, it's a great question. So just I'd say three things on that. I'd say the first one is this has gone to Grey County for a review in 2024, and they endorsed a provincial framework at the county level. And I'm happy to share that resolution or endorsement with you folks. The second is, you know, I'd say, you know, to your point, sometimes things can take a long time, and I think steps that can be taken to do more harmonization in the short run are definitely appreciated. I think it makes sense. But the third is it would be our hope that the province would open up a consultation on this topic in the coming months, because they have heard so much from communities. I get almost, you know, 1 to 2 calls per week from a different mayor or MPP calling me about bringing rideshare to their communities because of the lack of transportation.
Just a question, Jake. Today, we have an issue, and I think it's a fair in other communities that I've been in, where with taxi cabs, they have a problem or an issue with the number of cab drivers that they have. They can't get enough cab drivers. So my question is, moving to a regional bylaw, if you want to call it that, what allows or what guarantee is there that bringing in Uber will provide rideshare services 24/7?
Yeah, it's great question, sir. So I think the guarantee is the fact that in a place like British Columbia, where we launched only 3 or 4 weeks ago, you can now get an Uber ride 24/7, no matter where you are in the province, from the smallest town to the largest city. So we have data from British Columbia, from the province of Quebec, where you can get a trip anywhere, and from Newfoundland in Canada, as well as 49 of the US states around rural and sparse areas. It is a main focus of our business, sir, about how to adapt our business model to more rural or sparsely populated areas. And what that looks like is it might be more reserved trips, right? So folks know, here's when I need to get to the doctor, the grocery store, or when a game is letting out, and I'll reserve a trip. But to your point, a big push of ours, if we were to launch province-wide in Ontario, would be the recruitment of drivers, right? To make sure that we have enough supply to meet the demand from a place like Owen Sound. Because we believe that based on the number of folks who are opening the app and trying to get trips in and around your area, there will be significant demand for this service. And the demand is only increasing over time as population increases, as the population ages, as folks give up their car more, or like their additional vehicles. We would expect even in more significant growth. And we would want to meet that before launch. So we spend a lot of time before we launch in a market, making sure that we're able to have a reliable service. Because if we're not reliable at the beginning, it creates major problems for our trust with our customers.
Right.
So Jake, I might have missed it, but so you just have one license to operate in BC
Correct.
for the entire province?
Correct. And within that license, we can apply for different regions. So like there's an umbrella license, and then there's 5 zones, and you can petition the Passenger Transportation Board for like a specific license for the zones. Quebec, a single license. Newfoundland, Labrador, a single license.
And why not Ontario?
Because when Uber came to Ontario in 2014, there was a discussion at the provincial level. There was a private members bill actually to create a provincial model that didn't pass at the time. It was from the opposition. And from there, this kind of patchwork system evolved. And that's really what we're trying to address now.
Any other questions from anyone? Jake, what would you like to see lease board do?
Yeah, so like I think that if this is something that you think makes sense for your community, I think sharing some level of support with other police boards or with the MPP or different elected officials from the area, just letting them know that to the earlier question, there is a need, and this, at least looking at a provincial model might make sense. That I think would be the best thing. And then I think obviously we would like to keep in touch with you and other folks in Gray, because we know that there's a lot of interest there, and it's kind of adjacent to our current operating area. We'd love to kind of operate in Owen Sound in the future.
So we're looking at, I know, and I think it was Paul McGrath from Gray County that was, or he actually was from Owen Sound and then he moved to the county level. And he was the one that started the conversations about rideshare and Uber and Lyft and all of those different ones. Would it make sense, rather than trying to flip the province, if we were to have discussions at county level, so I'm thinking of Gray for sure, and maybe Bruce and Simcoe, because that takes up a big area of the province. Would that make sense if we had a harmonized licensing or bylaw for that area to start with?
Yeah, like, for sure. Like as I said, earlier, I think the more harmonization, the better. I think the more areas that can be captured under a single framework makes it easier for companies, also for drivers and customers. Um, but I would just be honest, like our focus right now is on the provincial solution, because it is what exists in, provinces that we're having the most success in scaling in rural and northern communities. And one of our objectives here, and one of the things we've been hearing most about, is the Ontario Northlander train coming back into service next year, and the need to provide more transportation options in northern Ontario. Many of those places don't have a bylaw right now. So I think, any harmonization that can be done in the interim would be very well supported, I think, while we kind of pursue this provincial approach.
Just when you bring up Northern Ontario, and I think there's some patches in the counties here, is internet service. Does that pose a problem for drivers and customers?
Yeah, so it is something, again, like as we've adapted our service into more rural and sparse communities, making sure the app is as functional as possible in, different levels of broadband that are available. So, we have had success in BC, Quebec, and Newfoundland where there's significant broadband challenges in some areas. But, definitely something we support is like the expansion of broadband. Because we know that those outages can be very impactful to a trip.
Yeah. And as you know, broadband isn't there yet, even in Ontario.
Yeah, of course.
Any other questions from the board?
Do you feel like you're making progress with the province?
Yes, sir. I think our message to them has been open this up for a consult, like let municipalities, police services boards, community safety organizations, charities, let them provide feedback on this. So we're hopeful that they would open that up in the next few months, because they have heard. I think they agree that this is an issue. That there are too many places in Ontario with too few transportation options, and I think most folks appreciate that the patchwork that exists right now could be improved.
Beth, go ahead.
Who at present is your most active advocate on the provincial level of Parliament?
Yeah,
Who do you
Minister Thompson. Minister Thompson.
Good, okay, Lisa, all right,
Yeah, she would love to
Yep.
do something on this.
okay, thank you.
Carol.
So two things is, this is addressed through the chair of the board, whether there's an advantage or if we could have a conversation with Minister Thompson about our need locally. So that we represent obviously our constituents here. So that would be a suggestion I might put forward, if the board agrees. And second of all, would you happen, Jake, to have any samples of existing harmonized bylaws from other provinces that we could reference? It's sometimes so much easier in conversations to have something that's already been enacted and utilized elsewhere.
Sure. Yeah, let me send. I'm not sure the right like I think I was corresponding with a few folks before this, but if someone flips me the right address to send around, I can share some background material. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce actually passed a resolution on this that includes some of the jurisdictional work and some of those examples. So let me share that with folks for you to review.
Good.
And you raise a valid point about the Chamber of Commerce. That may be another group that we might wish to
Yeah.
interface with. But yes, having an example of a bylaw that's been enacted would be good. It would be good for us to take a look at what it looks like framework wise.
You could send that to me, Jay.
Great.
It's good.
So once we get that, then we'll see if we can, do you want a full board meeting with Lisa or just a couple of people or find out what Lisa wants, how Lisa wants to handle it?
We all come from different perspectives and rules as we sit around this table, so
Mm.
I would encourage all the board, but it's your direction,
Okay.
Chair.
Let me talk to Lisa and see what her timing's like and what's her, because I think she's just finished spring sitting and they're off.
Yep. And Paul, get him in on it, because he's really involved in the rural aspect of it,
Yeah.
which is really what this pertains to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, we
Yes.
got
Paul Vickers.
Paul Vickers, yes.
That would be great. We just wait for your direction.
Okay, I'll talk to
And
Lisa.
Lisa's been on it from the beginning. She'll already have so
Background.
much of this right there.
Yeah, she knows this file quite well.
Good.
All right, I will reach out to Lisa and to Paul and see what they would like to do, what their time schedule is.
For sure.
Yeah, great.
All right, Jake, thank
Hey,
you for
let
your
me
time.
follow up, and you folks have a great day, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Jake. Appreciate the time. All right. Moving on to item C now. Annual report.
So everybody's been given a copy.
Whenever.
The annual report. In front of you. Yes, through the highlight. We're coming out that year. Welcome message to the chair.
Yeah.
Message to the chief. Vision, mission, values, our land acknowledgement. Highlights from our operations plan. In 2024 for this annual report marked the second year. And the midway point, 4 actions were completed, 1 action that led up and yet. And 45 or 90% were all in progress. We completed the new communication center. And as well, we put in some training and some new operating procedures or some call subtypes. That was significant. Another one was the formalized police funding or special possible funding from the Grey County for the courthouse. That was one of the highlights. Another was our enhanced mobile mental health crisis response team through grant. We're very thankful for. Victim services moved back into the OSPS space after leaving during COVID. That makes a much better connection between ourselves and the victim services members. We started a new efficiency committee in October, and we onboarded an HR manager, and they said a strategic recruitment plan. Internal wellness committee was formed. We did a number of things for wellness related initiatives. Training and performance appraisals were brought back online, and civilian members attended block training, which is a big ask for them. Going off through human resources. 8,000 new members to the service, 8 of them were recruit constables, 30% of the people hired were women. We had them over 30%.
Great.
And from here to 14. Our HR manager was trained as a reintegration facilitator. Some big progress and actually bringing on introducing a human resources aspect. Our year-end reporting. You'll see that our charges up significantly, 24% for increase in males charged, 39% increase in females charged, 42% in young offender males, and 43% young offender females. That's a huge increase in volume and workload, and we can't continue to do that through with the numbers that we have currently. I think almost at least at the. I was probably that's the 30% increase in total charges. Our ride program results are there included in the, it says the number of impaired drivers for 2024. That's only as a result of a ride program. That's not all impaired drivers. We move to the next page. We talk about reports. If you look, the number of crown briefs that was completed in 2024 increased 34%. Just to give you an idea of the impact of that, a crown brief is a complete package with the occurrence report, all the charges, information, summaries, everything put forth so that it can go to the crown attorney and they're able to prosecute it. Conservatively, I mean, some are longer, some are shorter, but conservatively, it's an hour or better of time for an officer to complete that crown brief. So when you see a 34% increase, that's a huge workload demand.
And that would be an experienced officer.
Yeah, that would be an experienced officer.
And we're getting short on those.
Yeah.
Significant increase in missing persons, 26%, and some of those are very time consuming. We recently had some that they go to CIB and we need to stay on top of them because we don't know what circumstances are, and even ones that we don't locate right away, we need to keep on top of it and keep checking and doing follow-ups. So they can drag on significant lengths of time and can take up significant resources just to some of them are gone for a little while. We locate them missing and reported missing, and then we'll find them right away. But some of those will drag on, and a 26% increase, significant demand increase. So that's increased 20%. Our freedom of information requests went down, which is less work for our clerks, so that's positive, I guess. Criminal records checks stayed about the same. Our warrants processed went down, but we had a big backlog prior to 2020 and 2023 when we had the introduction of the bail compliance and warrant apprehension team. So that's one of the reasons that they went downward. I would say that our workload doesn't change a lot. When we introduced the team, there were a number of very old ones that were in the system that we had to catch up on. So cleared that up. Now they flow through much quicker. We had a grand opening of the new on-sound community emergency communications center, and some of the information and data related to that. 5.7% increase in total calls and CAT events on page 18. And on-sound police service accounts for the largest volume of dispatch calls in the OSPSB with 28%. Or 18,000. That's an increase as well, but we're at 18,886 calls. I can tell you when I got here, the numbers were significantly lower than that every year. It was around 13 or 14,000. The numbers for the on-sound police service reported crime. I will say that these are preliminary numbers, but because they haven't come out through StatsCan, but these are some of the numbers that we have internally. So they're not using the Stats Canada per se, and they may change slightly because they haven't been published yet. But there was a 3% increase in volume compared to 2023. Violent crimes or crimes against persons increased 6%. That's significant. That's extremely significant given the fact that 2023 that you're comparing it to had the three homicides. And I would have hoped that our violent crime index would go down as a result. I'm not having the weighted offenses of homicide included there, but there's still 6% increase. Property crimes and crimes against property were down 15%. Other criminal code violations increased 48%. So there's a bit of a breakdown on the next page of what that looks like. See, the homicide was down 75%. Sexual assault with a weapon is down. So the weapon level 2 is down 67%, and sexual assaults are down 50%. But you'll see the drivers there. The aggravated assaults, and there's significant investigations. Assault with a weapon, 37% increase. That's a huge increase, and certainly a significant driver of violent crime this year. Assaults level 1 up slightly, but a significant number. Assaults against the police officer. That's not a good sign. Don't like to see that going up at all. Robberies were doubled last year. Criminal harassment increased 42%, and uttering threats increased 28%. So overall, we're not getting less work. And if you see below under the property crime, theft over 111% increase, while the others all drop down significantly. Other non-criminal code violations that fall under their administration of justice. That's failed to comply with orders, failed to appear in breach of probations. You can see a 76% increase in those. Some of that's the introduction of our bail compliance and warrant apprehension team, and the fact that we're now, doing more checking and we're watching and seeing what's going on. We're doing compliance checks. We're arresting a lot more people that are in their terms of release, and people are consistently getting released and getting breached, and getting released and getting breached. Increasing significantly. Professional standards highlight. There were no complaints involved in police service through the Inspector General. In 2024, there were 11 complaints received through LECA and 16 previous year. Of the 11, 8 were screened out and 3 were screened in for investigation. 1 was discontinued, 1 was withdrawn by the complaint after they were shown the video footage of the incident, and it was resolved and formally after the investigation showed that the new officer missed an important point in the police report. It was correct. There was 1 that was carried over, but it remained outstanding at the end of 2023, and that was screened out in the public instance. Information technology, that highlights their roles in the last year. Significant work on the new dispatch center and G911 implementation that's still on track for 2025. Computer aided dispatch was all upgraded through the comm center, and a lot of other IT projects that are listed there as well. Our youth and policing, I think it's important to highlight the fact that we employed 580 students throughout the last year, and they bring a lot of enthusiasm and really leadership. They go out and they work somewhat independently. They want space and granny, but they do an awful lot of interaction with the kids. And I think the biggest highlight there is that in 2024, we attended our first police constable who was with us in 2021 as a IB student. That's a success. It's doing very well as well. I like the torch run from June of 2024, where we coordinated and worked with Saugeen Shores, Hanover, West Grey, the OPC, and William Bruce counties, then wrapped up here with a run to Victoria Park next to the Julia MacArthur Center, and had a barbecue for everyone. There's a picture there. The turnout was great, and it got even bigger this year. Our auxiliary unit will continue to highlight their great work and the number of hours that they donate to our community, and certainly it highlights their food drive that took place. Rest of almost $7,000 in donations. We ran the Citizens Police Academy, where members are brought in from the community. Runs for 8 weeks, and we trained them, and they learned all of the things that we do. I highlight National Police Women's Day, and we're almost at that tipping point. So we're 30, we're 27% right now. Police women, and certainly we'd like to get over that mark in the coming year. I have our new website, a lot of work in order to promote the service and ensure that we meet with all the legislative requirements now on posting things through both the service and the board. Our expansion of our mental health crisis response team, and some stuff in regards to their involvement. You see in 2024, the number of calls they attended increased, percentage of crisis calls that led to apprehensions went down. I think that's a significant 50%, 56% decrease. I mean, that's making sure that people get what they need rather than having to apprehend them just in the hospital. The waiting time at the hospital was down, but we continue to monitor that. And the proactive outreach has increased significantly as well. So, we talked briefly about our core unit and their role and their involvement, and then highlight some of the significant criminal investigations over the last year. I won't go through those. We highlighted the arrest made in the Sharif Rahman homicide, because that was a significant community impact in 2023, and we just want the role and how that was how that played out in 2024. We introduced the bail compliance warrant apprehension team and what they've done, and you can see the numbers of individuals who've been charged with depending on bail, and that's some of those numbers I spoke about earlier. The failed to apply, failed to appear. Up 95%. The warrants executed were down slightly. The number of individuals under community supervision found in violation was up slightly. And the average number of charges, per month that were issued to individuals who are on bail, huge increase from 37 per month, to 86 per month, or 132% increase. So you can see the effectiveness of having somebody assigned to that specific role, especially in a small community. A little bit of a discussion around the community safety and well-being plan and the crime prevention action table that we take part in both of those. We hosted a raising cultural awareness and eliminating hate, and sound. That was through a partnership with the ministry funded some work from that through a grant. Very well received, very well attended. 150 plus people attended that event. And then a little bit about our success with grant funding and the help that we get from the provincial government, and a quick budget breakdown. You can see the breakdowns by division. And thank you to specifically Amy and Mark for getting all the work done and providing you with this annual report. Any questions from anybody around the table?
Hey, through Chair, at first glance looking at the report, there's been some changes in CSPS. I was up. Report or regulation has the chief prepare report. Or no, you know, one's found in section 51 of the act, one's found in section 59 of the regulation. At a very high level, you touched on both with each. Perfect. That's very well done. Some boards are offering you 2 reports, one by the board and one by the chief. Not the true what benefit that has. You have it all covered here, so that's great.
Crazy.
But it's all, but looking at it here, it looks like you've got it all covered within this report, which is.
Well, take credit for that. I will pass that along to Amy and Mark, who put it together and kind of took last year's model and took the act and the regulation and combined everything together.
Now the board has a responsibility to publish it and file with the municipality as well.
My part's down.
Yeah, cheers. Okay, great. Good job. Yeah. All right, so we'll talk about how to distribute the document. All right, moving on to item number D, the staff appreciation.
It has been booked for Wednesday, October 29th, and it'll be taking place at Hartwood again. It's just a forewarning that you'll be receiving an invitation in the coming months.
October 29th.
Do we need an approval to? Sure.
Sure, we can do that,
Okay, there's stuff.
right? And seconder for planning, thanks, Deb.
The same as last year.
Budget. Yeah. Yes, same as last year. Okay. Alrighty,
Was that, did you make that part of the motion?
I added it in, yes.
Yeah.
The budget will be roughly the same as it was last year.
okay. So, all in favor? Thank you. Just a note that we sent a letter to the city April 25th regarding issues with, I think it was spurred by Inspector Flooney's health and safety report and status of the building. And we put together a number of items that had been identified in consultant's report on the condition of the building. And we'd asked the city for an update on that. And this is just to follow up, to advise everyone that we have not received any direct response back from that. Okay. Yeah.
So, the capital detail sheets that were presented at the capital budgeting process that happened on Monday. Chief, do you receive those capital detail sheets?
And budget yet this year.
So what may be helpful is for both the chair and the chief of police to get those, because it actually starts to identify the timing. Do you get those?
On April 12th, we asked for an update on the schedule.
Ah, and you have not heard.
We have not heard. Now, if it's our obligation to go and try and find those reports, then that's fine. But at least on April 12th, or 13th, they could have said, go find the reports.
Exactly, and they've only come forward in, for presentation, so what are the next steps? This is this communication.
Well, this is a whole, yes, this is the communication issue that we're looking at, is that
Yeah.
we've asked for something.
Hmm.
And I use that based on the
Mhm.
capital budget
For
we
sure.
put forward last December. Or November, I guess it was an approval.
I've usually been brought in, budget discussions, because I have learned more about slopes and sewers and things than I ever needed to, but. But I haven't seen anything yet this year, and I haven't seen anything about budget prep or dates for this year.
So I know there was that every 6 months, there's a presentation about the multi-year capital plan and the detail sheets relating to the facilities were part of the mega
Yeah.
discussion. But what the disconnect, what I don't understand is, because it's about the police facilities, you didn't have any notification that was going to be presented. Oh, that's not, I mean, it's
It's not
important.
good.
Not good.
So where do we go from here?
Bring it up on Monday night. Add to the list.
Because even if a communication had been, this will be discussed in this.
Mm.
At least the information would be,
Mhm.
you're right. Searching for the information would lie on knowing it was there in the first place, correct? Wow. Well, it'll be helpful to discuss it. Is all of the board going to be present Monday?
I'm assuming so, but let's talk about that.
Another time.
Yeah, okay. All right, moving on. Anything else for this meeting open? If not, having completed all the items on the agenda, I'll terminate the meeting at 12:10. Thank you.